Hi everyone, welcome back to Rarely Taught. I'm your host Crystal, and today we are learning some crazy cool events that happened in the past. Well, I'd like to call them lesser known historical facts. And here's where we're going to start. Let's go to Australia, okay? The Great Emu War of Australia. So, what is this all about? Well, you guys, it's in the 1930s, there's a Great Depression happening, and there is a lot less food going around. It's right after World War I. There's a lot of veterans who are farmers in Western Australia, and they're hungry and they need to grow more wheat. Now, there's a problem, and a rather big problem if you consider how big these birds are. So, you got these 100-pound about emu birds, and they're just going through their migratory passage, and they're coming into, I believe it is Western Australia. That's right. And so they're migrating in, and there's this clash between the farmers who are being encouraged to have more wheat production, and then there's these emus who are just migrating. But again, you've got the hungry humans and you've got the emus doing their migration pattern. So what is happening, you guys, with these emus who are native to Australia is they are not allowing the farmers to plant wheat, and they're actually creating an awful lot of problems, from destroying fences and farmland, and they're just getting in the way. And these farmers, all they want to do is feed their family and make ends meet. So after some time, the farmers actually call on the help of the government, because with all this destruction going on, they're desperate. Like, what are you going to do, right? So there's this ecological situation with these emus. So what the government does is they actually respond to these farmers, and they send a small military detachment equipped with 2 Lewis machine guns and a supply of ammunition. And the idea is to take these about 20,000 emus and gun them down. But it, well, turns out to be a lot more formidable and not as easy as one would think. And so as it happened, these emus are formidable opponents, right? They're fast, they're agile, and they're seemingly, well, they had a knack for guerrilla warfare. The soldiers quickly found that even machine guns were ineffective against these birds, because they would disperse and they were fast-moving objects. And, well, one notable encounter, a group of about 1,000 emus was sighted, but the machine guns were only able to kill about a dozen birds. So the farmers, in the end, are left with this issue because the government really couldn't fix the problem. So the soldiers described these emus as remarkable for their ability to take multiple bullets and yet continue running away. Even attempts to herd these birds, which is something you would think would be quite simple, was a challenge. And they even tried herding them towards the guns using vehicles, and that failed due to the rough terrain and emus, their unpredictable movements, right? So one question I had about this particular experience, however, is if they did shoot these birds, did they eat these birds? It was the Great Depression. You know, we can postulate that that maybe happened, but there's really no accounts of these farmers actually even eating emus. Anyway, so long story short, after this whole Emu War was going on, several weeks passed and over 10,000 rounds of ammunition were fired, but the operation was an actual fail, total fail. Military, they withdrew, and the farmers were left to deal with this problem of emus. So the Great Emu War ended, and, well, the emus were unlikely victors, right? The Great Emu War is more than just an amusing anecdotal story. It's a story that, well, underscores the complexities of environmental management and human-animal interactions, which goes on and on and on because we live on this planet with animals. It's a reminder of nature's resilience and unpredictability, there you go, there's that word, and how even well-intentioned human interventions can lead to unexpected and sometimes, well, absurd outcomes. So this unique chapter in Australian history provides us not just a humorous tale, but also one that we can examine the broader themes of environmental impact, military intervention in civilian affairs. This time didn't work out, and the unpredictability of the natural world. So it goes down in history as a bizarre example of human-animal conflict, where emus, without firing a single shot, won the war. Now let's move on, you guys, to this crazy experience that happened back in 1518. It's the dancing plague. What is the dancing plague? Well, in a city called Strasbourg, I'm hopefully pronouncing that correct, now part of modern day France, I should say, for a story that sounds kind of like that of a fairy tale gone wrong. This dancing plague, it happened. Imagine one day in the summer, a woman named Frau Troffea, Troffea, for those who are French, I'm probably not doing a good job of it. She steps out into the street and starts dancing, right? A little odd, but okay. Nothing strange about that, but except, you guys, she doesn't stop. She just keeps dancing. And for days, she keeps dancing. And then, guess what happens? More people join in. So soon there are hundreds of people dancing in the streets uncontrollably, incessantly, for days and even weeks. And then stuff happens, right? So I mean, well, you see, Frau, however to say her name, she's another, well, otherwise ordinary woman. And this frantic dance, these impulsive movements, it has health issues that accompany it. So as she dances for days without rest, she collapses with exhaustion, only to get up and continue. Now, as I was saying, all of a sudden this weird phenomenon spreads like wildfire. There you go, there's that word today. Within a week, 34 more people join in to this impulsive, involuntary kind of dance. And by the end of the month, you guys, the numbers swell to around 400 people. So again, 1518, you got 400 people, and they're just dancing out compulsively, erratically, and there's no stopping to them. And it's very strange, right? Like, why does this happen? You know, and to this day, people really don't quite understand. But what they did is kind of interesting. So the authorities at the time were like, if they're dancing, well, let's just put on some dance music and let's just make it better. But that actually exacerbated the situation. So as the dancers, they twirl and they twist, many die from strokes and heart attacks or sheer exhaustion. Physicians at the time, they ruled out astrological and supernatural causes. Instead, they're declaring it a natural disease caused by hot blood. What? What is hot blood, right? But we know now that hot blood is not actually a medical condition. So, well, what is it? Modern theories offer some explanations. Ergotism, it's caused by consuming ergot contaminated grain. And what could have happened potentially to trigger these convulsions and this mass hysteria and even hallucinations is eating that wheat and then having that happen to themselves. Yeah, so it's kind of crazy. Anyways, needless to say, other people think there's mass hysteria, small knit communities under stress, maybe that brought it about. But the dance could have been a massive stress response, a collective expression of a community in crisis. But if that's the case, we've gone through in our modern days a ton of crisis. Why hasn't anybody been dancing now? So, I mean, I don't think that theory really kind of works per se. But that being said, perhaps the most intriguing of the dancing plague is its mixture of the physical and the psychological, the individual and the communal. It's a powerful testament to the complexities and the ways in which our bodies and our minds can react to extreme stress and potential cultural influences, or maybe it even goes back to ergotism. So in 1518, it was narrowly victims of a mysterious ailment. They were part of a human phenomena that still actually captivates and baffles us to this day. Like, truly, we still don't really know why it happened, right? Like, who knows? The dancing plague remains a unique event in history, one that's rarely taught about, but is one that's very curious. It is definitely, for its sheer oddity, kind of bizarre we don't talk about more between the physical and the psychological, the individual and the collective. It's not just blurred, but can be danced upon in the most unexpected ways. Haha, no pun intended. What caused the bizarre event? Again, ergot poisoning, a psychoactive mold found on rye, maybe mass hysteria. I don't know. A curse. Geez, right? It's a mystery. It's a historical phenomenon. We just do not know. Now let's move on to Tulip Mania. Tulip Mania is fascinating. Hold on one sec. There we go. Coming back to you. You love technological issues when you're doing podcasts. So in the Netherlands, there is a crazy thing that happened in the 17th century. a time and place where a flower, yes, you guys, a flower, caused an economic bubble that's still talked about to this day. Well, welcome to Tulip Mania. Let's go for this. So in the 1600s, tulips were introduced to the Dutch from the Ottoman Empire, and they quickly became a coveted luxury item. Thanks to this virus that affected the tulips, bulbs, they were vibrant, multicolored patterns appeared on the petals because of this virus, making them even more desirable. They weren't just flowers, you guys, they were a status symbol. And the real craze began with the appearance of what's called broken tulips. A virus affected, again, and created these flamboyant, streaked, beautiful pattern on petal tulips. Each bulb produced this unique flower in its pattern and coloration, and these tulips became incredibly prized, and a speculative frenzy began to occur. So, man, it's hard to even fathom this happened, but I mean, I think of like the no fear shirts back in the 1990s when everybody went on a craze, or like those the spinners. Anyways, let's go into these tulips more. So prices skyrocketed. At the peak of the Tulip Mania, a single bulb could sell for an amount that could buy a luxurious house in Amsterdam. People were trading land, life savings, and even livestock for tulip bulbs. How crazy is that? But as all bubbles happen, it eventually burst. So in 1637, the prices collapsed, leaving many in actual financial ruin. Tulip bulbs were traded on the stock exchanges in numerous Dutch towns and cities, with prices skyrocketing up until 1937. And at the height of the mania, right at 1637, I should say, sorry guys, some single tulips were selling for 10 times the annual income of a skilled craftsman. 10 times. This was not just a market, it was a phenomenon. People from all walks of life, from skilled tradesmen to wealthy merchants, were caught up in this tulip mania. Tulip mania serves as an early example of an economic bubble, where the value of an asset, well, kind of disconnects from the intrinsic value. And it's a tale of beauty, of greed, and it's a cautionary reminder of the risks of, well, speculative investing, right? The bubble, however, was unsustainable. As I mentioned, it collapsed in 1637, and it happened almost overnight. It was pretty impactful. So as those market prices plummeted, these investors were in financial ruins, and the fallout was so severe, you guys, the government had to step in. But the economic impact lingered for years. Kind of, modern day times, we have economic impacts where the government's had to step into some car dealerships and car companies. But think about that they did it for tulips back in 1637. So what turned a beautiful flower into an object of financial ruin? Tulip mania, often cited as an example of irrationality of the crowds, and how emotion and speculation can drive markets away from rationality. People don't always use their common sense, and we see that a lot still. It wasn't just about the tulips, though. It was about what they represented, right? Status, wealth, the allure of getting rich quickly. Man, you want to get rich quick? You grew tulips in that day, right? Man, tulips made a lot of people quite wealthy too. So the tulip mania teaches us an important lesson about the nature of financial bubbles and the risks of speculative investing. As I've said, it shows us how even the most rational people can get caught up in a frenzy of booming markets, and how that can lead to disastrous results. So when we look back at Tulip Mania tonight and Rarely Taught, not just as an economic event, but as a fascinating chapter in the history, right? A story of beauty, desire, and the dangers of greed. Now we are moving on to something pretty remarkable. This event is called the Christmas Truce in 1914. It's not that widely talked about, but it comes with an awful lot of weight behind it, and it should actually be shared more in schools. So there's an unexpected humanitarian event that occurred in World War I. During one of the darkest events and times in history, the Christmas Truce of 1914 in World War I stands out. So picture this, you guys. It's Christmas Eve, and you're a soldier in the trenches, cold, wet feet, homesick, surrounded by the horrors of war. And then something incredible happens, right? Just absolutely mind-baffling, okay? You're on the battlefield of the Western Front. German and British soldiers spontaneously ceasefire. They stop. They emerge from the trenches not to fight, but to celebrate Christmas. And a few things actually start this to actually happen. But what ends up happening is they exchange gifts of cigarettes and plum puddings. They sing carols together, and they even play soccer in no man's land, where people are usually, having a real problem. So, in various places along the Western Front, British and German soldiers set aside their weapons. It started actually because of songs. From the German trenches, the melody of Silent Night echoed through the cold night air. Silent night, holy night, all is well. Anyways, you get the idea? So the British troops responded with their own carols. And this, in this cold, very formidable time, became this scene that was surreal. You had these soldiers from both sides cautiously emerging from their trenches. And they met again in no man's land, that deadly space on the front lines. And they transformed what was a brief moment in meeting ground of peace into this celebration time. And it's beautiful, right? Like you have this singular, unorganized event that just was grassroots that happened because of the soldiers coming together, just having a break, a moment of humanity. And that's why that Christmas truce of 1914 is just so powerful. What else can I tell you guys about this? So it is really, when you think about it, it's a profound act of humanity amidst a horrible, horrible war. And it's something that, from a human significance perspective, we can, in times of great strife and great conflict, still come together in even such a grim backdrop of a war and share together what it is to really be human. That's the love and the kindness. It's really extraordinary and of its nature. So, I mean, it wasn't ordered by high command. It was a spontaneous act of the soldiers themselves, and it shows us common decency and camaraderie amongst foes, right? However, as it happened, you guys, the truce was fleeting, and sadly, by the new year, the fighting had resumed, and war would continue for 4 more years. 4 more years. That's like double the time of COVID, right? With a brutal toll of those lives being lost on both sides. But the memory of that Christmas truce, it's lived on, and it's a poignant reminder that even in the midst of conflict, we can connect over empathy and we can prevail as humans. A moment in history, well, a powerful testament to the human spirit of kindness under the most unlikely circumstances. So I'm going to end there, you guys, tonight's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for coming to this episode, and it's our second one. I look forward to sharing with you guys next week's episode. It'll be episode 3. And all the best to you. I'm your host, Crystal from Rarely Taught. Thanks for stopping in.